Welcome back. During the G7 summit with world leaders, President Biden addressed the ongoing battle between Israel and Hamas that has inflamed divisions among many Americans.
I've laid out an approach that has been endorsed by the UN Security Council, by the G7, by the Israelis, and the biggest hang-up so far is Hamas refusing to sign on, even though they have submitted something similar.
Democratic Congressman Khanna of California, a top surrogate for the Biden campaign, who has been critical of the president's approach to the war, joins me now. Congressman Khanna, welcome back to Meet the Press, and happy Father's Day to you as well.
Peter, happy Father's Day to you and to the viewers.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Hamas has balked at every ceasefire proposal, as you have witnessed. They are holding out for a complete withdrawal of Israeli troops and a permanent ceasefire. According to the Wall Street Journal, the leader of Hamas called civilian losses in Gaza necessary sacrifices. What more do you propose President Biden should be doing if Hamas will not agree?
Well, the president has set forth a clear vision, and I support the ceasefire proposal and release of hostages that he set out. The UN has endorsed it. The Arab League has endorsed it. We need Egypt and Qatar to put more pressure on Hamas. Hamas is saying, well, you can't have phases. You need everything done on phase one. That's unrealistic. There needs to be more pressure. But there also needs to be more pressure on Netanyahu. Benny Gantz has been all over Israeli TV saying that Netanyahu has been undermining a hostage deal. And it's a philosophical difference, Peter. Benny Gantz is saying prioritize the hostage deal and the peace. Netanyahu is saying they want to destroy military all of Hamas. And I don't think that's achievable.
Let me ask you specifically about Benjamin Netanyahu. By invitation of Congress, Netanyahu is going to be speaking before a joint session of Congress to take place next month in July. Some Democrats are suggesting forms of protest. What do you think that should look like, and will you attend his address?
I will not attend. I said that if he wants to come to speak to members of Congress about how to end the war and release hostages, I would be fine doing that. But I'm not going to sit in a one-way lecture. And I agree with Representative Clyburn. I mean, how he treated President Obama, he should not expect reciprocity. That said, I think it should be polite. We're not going to make a big deal about it. He's obviously addressing the Congress, and there has to be decorum.
Let me ask you about the big picture as it relates to foreign policy right now. Former President Trump and his allies have made the argument that October 7th, the attack on Israel and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, both happened not when Donald Trump was in office, but when Joe Biden was in office. Why shouldn't Americans consider that argument when they're deciding how to vote this fall?
Peter, it used to be that we were bipartisan on foreign policy. I mean, you can't blame President Biden or Trump for Putin's evil. I mean, Putin invaded a sovereign country on Ukraine. And now the question is, philosophically, are we going to stand up for Ukraine's integrity? I mean, Putin's peace deal on the table, he wants 1/5 of all of Ukraine. He wants more territory of Ukraine than he's currently occupied. And so the question for both of the candidates should be, are you going to agree to Putin's term? Biden hasn't. We've supported Ukraine's aid. Would Trump agree to Putin's terms?
Let me ask you, if I can, about this broadly. The president has seen a big erosion as it relates to young voters that you've been speaking to a lot in your campaigning here, specifically as it relates to the war in Gaza. You said back in February that even if President Biden were to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza, there would still need to be a healing period before Democrats, these young voters, may be able to come back and be comfortable with his leadership again. That was 4 months ago. Is the president running out of time to win back some of these young voters?
Well, the biggest thing we're running out of time is more people dying, and we have to remember the humanitarian stakes. But yes, it's a challenge for our party. Young people want the war to end, but what young people want is a vision, and the president started that with a ceasefire. I hope he can go further, and he should call for 2 states. He should say in his second term he's going to convene a peace conference in the Middle East, recognize a Palestinian state without Hamas, work with Egypt, Saudi Arabia on it.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I want to ask you about a couple other topics quickly on policy, on immigration. Republicans tanked a bipartisan border security bill, as you know. So the president recently took executive action to restrict the number of migrants who can seek asylum who are entering the United States. You're among many Democrats who have been critical of this policy. An ACLU lawsuit says the president's plan is, quote, legally indistinguishable from the Trump ban. Do you agree?
I don't think it's the right policy I understand the president's frustration. He has tried for 3 years, not 6 months, 3 years to get Congress to fund immigration judges, Border Patrol. We haven't done it. But this is not going to solve the issue because you have an artificial cap and people are basically going to go to gangs and come through non-port of entries. And we don't want to have that situation on the border.
Let me ask you about Hunter Biden. He was convicted on gun charges this week. He'll be back in the court on tax charges in California, as you know, later this year, even though Hunter Biden is not on the ballot. The case this fall could raise some potentially damaging details about Hunter Biden's business dealings. How concerned should Democrats be about another high-profile trial in the waning weeks of this campaign season?
It won't be an issue because Democrats actually believe in the rule of law. You asked Representative Donalds, would you accept the Trump case even if it went to an appeal? He didn't say yes. I would accept it if it was overturned, and I accept whatever the judicial process is with Hunter Biden. This is really about a father's love for his son, of someone who has had addiction, and he understands that he will have legal consequences, and the president is prepared to deal with that with the love of a father. On Father's Day, I think that's what's going to come out, the president's love and concern for someone who's had a difficult time.
Just a few weeks from now, not even a few weeks from now, 11 days from now, we're going to see Donald Trump and Joe Biden together on stage at the debate. Mr. Trump just turned 78 this past week. Joe Biden, as you know, is 81 years old. But according to our polling, Americans are much more concerned about President Biden's mental and physical fitness than they are about Donald Trump's. Why is that?
Some of it is aesthetic. I mean, Donald Trump has been blessed with good genes or whatever he does. But I think that the real issue is that the president always delivers in big moments. He did in the State of the Union. And people are going to see the difference. Does Donald Trump want to give up part of Ukraine? Does he want to have tariffs that are going to increase prices for folks? President Biden has brought back manufacturing at factories. How many factories did Donald Trump bring back? Let's have a debate about the different visions of America.
Let me ask you finally about your future. When you were recently in New Hampshire, a local Democrat there introduced you, sir, as the 5th member of their delegation because you have been there so often. Is a presidential bid something that you would consider in the future?
I'm so focused, as is everyone, on trying to get President Biden elected. But I will say this. This country is hungry after that for a new generation. And we've got tremendous talent in our party. And there are young people on the other side as well. And I'm looking forward, after President Biden is reelected, to a new generation leading this country.
Congressman Khanna, we appreciate your time. Happy Father's Day again to you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.